The water is my sanctuary. It is the only place in the world that makes sense. Under the surface, the chaos of the world above, the shouting, the politics, the whispers, all of it dissolves into a single, beautiful, muffled hum. There is only the rhythmic pull of my arms, the steady kick of my feet, and the solid, unwavering black line on the bottom of the pool, a faithful guide leading me home. In the water, I am not an outsider. I am not the quiet girl who doesn't fit in. I am a machine built for speed, and the water is my willing accomplice. But the moment my head breaks the surface, the world comes rushing back in. Evans, let's go. Coach Miller's voice echoed off the high tiled walls of the Southern California University natatorium. You're half a second off your pace. This isn't a Sunday stroll in the park. I pulled myself out of the pool, my body tingling with the pleasant ache of exertion. I didn't say anything. I just nodded, my eyes fixed on the large pace clock on the wall. Half a second. Unacceptable. I had been thinking, letting my mind drift. A rookie mistake. The rest of the team was gathered at the other end of the pool, clustered around Ashley Hayes, our team captain. They were laughing about some party from the weekend. Ashley, her blonde ponytail a perfect swinging metronome, was holding court, her voice bright and confident. She was everything I was not, bubbly, political, a master of the team's intricate social hierarchy. She was also the second fastest 100-meter freestyler on the team. I was the first, and that, I was beginning to realize, was a problem. Hey, Maya, a voice said. It was Sarah, one of the few freshmen who still dared to talk to me. Are you coming to the team dinner tonight? What team dinner? I asked, my stomach tightening. Sarah's face fell. Oh, Ashley was supposed to send out a group text. It's at that new pasta place downtown. I must have missed it, I lied, pulling my goggles down. The truth was, I hadn't missed it. I had been deliberately excluded. Again, it was another small, precise cut in a death by 1,000 paper cuts down my Lolo. My grandfather back in Ceylon used to be a fisherman. He taught me that the best way to catch fish was not with a big, noisy net, but with a patient, silent line. He believed in quiet work. Ang aista e nahuli se bibig, he'd say, a sly smile on his face. The fish is caught by the mouth. Talking is a trap. Work is the prize. I had built my entire life around that philosophy. Head down. Mouth shut. Work harder than everyone else. In the solitary, meritocratic world of the water, it had made me a champion. But here, on the dry, treacherous land of team politics, it was making me a target. I didn't play their games. I didn't gossip. I didn't go to the parties. I trained, I studied, I slept, and I trained again. My focus was my strength, and they were trying to frame it as my greatest sin. The campaign against me was a masterpiece of subtlety, and Ashley was its unquestioned architect. She never confronted me directly. Her attacks were always cloaked in the language of concern and team unity. In the locker room. It was a quiet word to a teammate. I'm just worried about Maya, I'd overhear her say, her voice dripping with false sympathy. She seems so distant. Her energy is just so intense. It's affecting the team vibe, you know? The other girl would nod, her eyes flicking nervously in my direction. During team meetings, she would launch into grand speeches about camaraderie. A relay team is only as strong as its bonds. She'd declare, her eyes sweeping the room, and then landing on me for just a fraction of a second too long. It's not about who has the fastest time on paper. It's about who you trust in the water. It's about family. The implication was clear. I was not family, her favorite. Tactic was to frame my dedication as a form of selfishness. Last week, I had stayed after practice for an extra hour to work on my foot turns. It was a weakness in my race, and I was determined to fix it. The next day, Ashley pulled me aside, her face a mask of gentle reproof. "Hey, Maya," she began, her tone soft and sisterly. "A few of the girls mentioned you stayed late yesterday. We love your work ethic, we really do. But when you do that, it makes the other girls feel like you don't think they're working hard enough. It creates a weird, competitive energy when we should be focused on supporting each other." I stared at her, dumbfounded. She was reprimanding me for working too hard. She was twisting my commitment into a crime against her cult of manufactured positivity. "I was just working on my turns, Ashley," I said, my voice flat. "I know," she said, patting my arm. "And we appreciate it. Just try to be more of a team player, okay?" She smiled, a bright, empty, politician smile, and walked away, leaving me standing there, my mind reeling from the sheer, pretzel-logic audacity of her manipulation. I tried. I really did. I tried to join their conversations. I'd ask about the party I hadn't been invited to. They'd give me short, polite answers, and then someone would change the subject, the invisible wall between us shimmering back into place. I brought a box of donuts to a morning practice. Ashley thanked me sweetly, then forgot to put them out for the rest of the team. They were found stale in her locker 2 days later. Every attempt I made to connect was expertly parried, used as more evidence of my supposed awkwardness, my inability to fit in. I was in a game where the rules were constantly changing, a game I had no idea how to play. The only place I still knew the rules was in the water, and so I retreated. I swam harder, I got faster. My times in practice began to drop dramatically. I was now a full second faster in the 100-meter freestyle than Ashley. I was the undisputed anchor for our championship relay team, and I had just painted a giant, unmissable target on my own back. The end came on a Sunday, August 3rd, 2025. Coach Miller, a man whose spine seemed to be made of gelatin, had called a mandatory team-only meeting in one of the university's sterile, soulless classrooms. The air was thick with a tense, unnatural silence. The other girls wouldn't look at me. They were all staring at their hands, at the floor, anywhere but at my face. It was an ambush. I just didn't know it yet. Coach Miller cleared his throat, looking nervous. "All right, ladies, thanks for coming. We're at a critical point in our season. The national championships are just around the corner. And I feel, and some of your leadership feels," he glanced at Ashley, "that we need to address the atmosphere on this team. We need to ensure we are all 100% unified, 100% committed to the team, and not just to ourselves." Then he turned the floor over to Ashley. She stood up, her face a mask of grave, serious concern. She looked like a queen reluctantly about to sentence a traitor to death. "Thank you, Coach," she began, her voice soft but carrying to every corner of the room. "I just want to say that I love this team. You are all my sisters." She looked around, making eye contact with every girl in the room. "Except for me. A team is a family," she continued, her voice gaining a passionate tremor. "And in a family, you protect each other, you lift each other up. But sometimes one person's energy can bring the whole family down. Sometimes a commitment to individual achievement can become toxic. It can make others feel like they aren't good enough. It can create division. And we, as a team, cannot afford to be divided." She didn't use my name. She was too smart for that. But every word was a poison arrow aimed directly at my heart. She was using my greatest strengths, my focus, my drive, my success, and twisting them into character flaws. My hard work was toxic. My speed was divisive. My quiet dedication was a negative influence. I looked at the faces of my teammates. A few of them, like Sarah, looked uncomfortable, guilty. But most of them were nodding along, their expressions hardening. Ashley's poison was working. They were buying it. They resented my speed because Ashley had given them permission to. She had reframed her own jealousy as a legitimate team concern. Then came the final brutal move. "Coach," Ashley said, her voice full of a fake, heavy sadness. I think we need to recommit to each other as a family. And I think the only way to do that is to let the team itself decide what this family should look like. We need to have a unity vote." Unity vote. I had never heard of such a thing. Coach Miller, completely under her spell, nodded gravely. "I agree. I think that's a good idea, Captain. A way for us to move forward together." He pulled out a stack of small, blank slips of paper and a pen. "I want each of you to write down the name of anyone on this team who you feel is not fully committed to our shared values of unity and support. If any one person's name appears on a majority of these ballots, then we, as a team, will have to make a very difficult decision." My blood ran cold. This wasn't a meeting. It was a tribunal, a public shaming, a modern-day witch hunt, and I was the witch. I watched, my body numb with a dawning, sickening horror, as he passed out the slips of paper. I saw the girls furtively scribbling, folding the papers in half. I saw their eyes, refusing to meet mine. They were casting their stones, one by one. I was being tried, convicted, and sentenced by a jury of my peers, and my only crime was being faster than their queen. The coach collected the slips of paper in a small, empty box. He cleared his throat, a grim expression on his face. "The votes are in," he said, as if this were some democratic, noble process. He unfolded the first slip, then the second, then the third. He didn't have to read them all. He looked up, his eyes finally landing on me, full of a weak, pathetic pity. "Maya," he said, my name sounding like a death sentence. "I'm sorry. The team has spoken." The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a guillotine. Blade dropping, effective immediately. He continued, unable to look at me now, staring at a spot on the wall just over my head. "You are no longer a member of the Southern California University swim team. As per the terms of the athletic agreement, your scholarship is hereby revoked." Revoked. No longer a member. The words didn't even make sense. My team, my scholarship, my life. It was all I had. It was everything. I had moved across the country for this. I had sacrificed my childhood for this. And in the space of a 10-minute meeting, it had all been taken away. I looked at Ashley. She was the only one looking directly at me. And on her face, beneath a thin veneer of sadness, was a look of pure, unadulterated triumph. She had won. She had eliminated her only rival. She had secured her spot on the relay. I stood up, my movements stiff, robotic. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I was too far gone for that. I was in a place beyond rage, beyond heartbreak. It was a place of cold, silent, absolute nothingness. I turned, and without a word, I walked out of the room, the collective weight of my teammates' betrayal, a physical force at my back. I walked out of the natatorium, out into the blinding, indifferent California sun, a ghost in my own life. I had been voted off the island, and I had absolutely nowhere left to go. The walk back to my dorm room was a journey through a dreamscape. The manicured lawns of the university, the happy, chattering students, the golden light of the late afternoon, none of it felt real. It was a movie, and I was a ghost floating through it, unseen and unheard. The only real thing in the world was the sickening leaden weight in my own stomach. My keycard still worked on my dorm room door. I suppose they hadn't gotten around to deactivating it yet. Small mercies. I closed the door behind me, and the cheerful sounds of campus life were instantly cut off, replaced by a profound, suffocating silence. My room was a shrine to a life that was no longer mine. Trophies and medals lined the shelves. A giant calendar on the wall had the entire season's meet schedule mapped out in neat, color-coded blocks culminating in the NCAA championships. My textbooks for the fall semester, the one I would now not be attending, were in a neat stack on my desk. Every object was a monument to a future that had just been murdered. I sat on the edge of my bed, my body numb, my mind a silent howling. Void. For years, my life had been a meticulously structured timetable. 430, wake up. 500, practice. 800, class. 1200, lunch. 1300, class. 1600, practice. 1900, dinner. 2000, study. 2200, sleep. It was a monastic, grueling existence, but it was my existence. It had a purpose. It had a direction. It had the unwavering black line on the bottom of the pool, always leading me forward. Now, the timetable was wiped clean. The black line was gone. There was only nothing. An endless, terrifying expanse of empty time. The official email arrived at 7:58 p.m. that night on Sunday, August 3rd. It was from the athletic department. A cold, bureaucratic final nail in my coffin. Dear Miss Evans, it began. This letter serves as official notification that following a team disciplinary vote, your athletic scholarship and position on the SCU women's swim team have been revoked, effective immediately. As per university housing policy for student athletes, you will have 72 hours to vacate your dormitory room. We wish you the best in your future endeavors. 72 hours? They hadn't just taken my team and my scholarship. They were making me homeless. The cruelty of it was so absolute, so efficient, it was almost impressive. I thought of Ashley, probably at the team dinner I wasn't invited to, celebrating her victory, her successful coup. She hadn't just beaten me, she had erased me. I didn't swim the next morning. For the first time since I was 7 years old, I did not wake up at 4:30 a.m. and walk to a pool. The absence of the routine, the lack of the familiar burn in my muscles, and the scent of chlorine in my nose felt like a missing limb. I just lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling as the sun came up on a life I no longer knew how to live. I spent the next 2 days in a fog of despair, packing my life into cardboard boxes. Each medal I wrapped in paper, each faded team photo I took down from the wall was a fresh torment. This was my history, and it was being packed away like it had never happened. I was adrift, drowning in the silence, and I was so alone. The last night, sitting on the floor of my nearly empty room, I finally did what I had been too ashamed, too broken to do. I called home. I called the one place in the world where my identity wasn't tied to a time on a clock. I called SIBLOM. My mother answered, her voice a warm, familiar melody in the Kinarea dialect of our province. Najia, Nak. Why are you calling so late? And just hearing her voice so full of love, so oblivious to the catastrophe that had consumed me, the dam broke. The numbness shattered, and the grief, the rage, the humiliation, it all came pouring out in a torrent of ragged, uncontrollable sobs. Ma. I cried, the word a wound. They kicked me off the team. I told her everything. The whispers, the exclusion, Ashley's campaign, the ambush in the meeting, the vote, the scholarship. I told her I had 12 hours left before I had to be out. Of my dorm, that I had nowhere to go, that my life was over. She listened, a profound, eternal silence on the other end of the line. She let me pour out all the poison until I was just a spent, hiccuping husk. Okay, anak kayo, she said, her voice soft but steady as a rock. You listen to me now? Is your life over? Indeed, no, it is not. I could hear my father's voice in the background, angry and protective. Your father wants to get on a plane right now and come punch this coach, she said, and a small, watery laugh escaped my lips. But that is not the way. She paused. Do you remember what your Lolo used to say? About the big storm in '84 that destroyed his fishing boat? I remembered. It was one of his favorite stories. He said the sea can be a cruel mother. I whispered. Yes, she said. But that is not the important part. The important part is what he did next. He did not cry. He did not curse the sea. He gathered the broken pieces of his boat, the Barodo, and he built a new one. A smaller one, yes, but it was stronger. He knew where the old weaknesses were. He made it better. He said the serum taught him how to be a better builder. She took a deep breath. This is your storm, Maya. They have broken your boat. So you will take the broken pieces and you will build a new one. You are a Villanueva. Our blood is from the mountains of Panay and the shores of the Sulu Sea. We are not a people who break easily. Her voice was a steel rod, reinforcing my own crumbling spine. You are more than a swimmer, Anak. You are our daughter, and we are so, so proud of you. Now you pack your things, you put them in your car, and you start driving. It doesn't matter where, just move forward. We will send you money. You will find a way. You will build a better boat. We talked for another hour. It was not a conversation that solved my problems. I was still kicked out. I was still homeless. My dream was still dead. But it was a conversation that reminded me of who I was. I was not just Maya Evans, the failed swimmer. I was Maya Villanueva Evans, the granddaughter of a fisherman who knew how to survive a storm. And for the first time in days, I felt a flicker of something that wasn't despair. It was the smallest, most fragile glimmer of a will to fight. I had to go back to the natatorium one last time to clear out my locker. It was the final humiliation. I went in the middle of the day, hoping the team would be in class. No such luck. They were all there, stretching for afternoon practice. The moment I walked into the locker room, the conversation stopped. The air became thick with a mixture of guilt and pity. Most of them wouldn't look at me. They just stared into their lockers, suddenly fascinated by the arrangement of their swimsuits. Ashley, however, looked right at me. She gave me a small, sad, sympathetic smile. It was the most triumphant, cruel expression I had ever seen. I ignored her. I walked to my locker, the one that had been my small personal space for 3 years. Then I began to empty it. The contents were a sad, chlorine-scented history of my life. A faded photo of me and my parents after my first state championship. A collection of silly keychains from my teammates from my freshman year when we were still friends. Old dog-eared swim meet programs. And at the very bottom, under a pile of old goggles, was a crumpled magazine I had completely forgotten about. I pulled it out. It was a dog-eared copy of Swim World from 2 years ago. The cover story was about the last Olympic cycle. I was about to toss it in the trash bag I was filling, but it fell open to a page I had bookmarked. It was a feature article, a long-form profile. The headline was, "The Monk of Malibu, Where Forgotten Swimmers Go to Be Reborn." The article was about a man named Cal Morgan. He was a legendary coach from the 90s, a brilliant, iconoclastic genius who had produced a dozen Olympians. But he had a falling out with the National Swimming Federation, hated the politics of collegiate sports, and had abruptly disappeared from the public eye. The article was about his reemergence. He had, the journalist wrote, established a small, Spartan and brutally exclusive training camp in a remote canyon in the Malibu Hills. He didn't recruit. He didn't advertise. He only took on swimmers who came to him. And he only took on the desperate, the washouts, the head cases, the athletes who had been chewed up and spit out by the very system that had just destroyed me. The article was filled with quotes from swimmers he had resurrected. He will break you down into your component parts and rebuild you from nothing. One said, "He's the meanest, scariest, most brilliant man I've ever met," said another. The final paragraph had stuck with me. Cal Morgan's camp is not a place for the faint of heart. It is a monastery of pain, a last chance saloon for the forgotten. But for those who can survive it, it is also a place of miracles. It is where you go when you have absolutely nowhere else to go. I stood there in the silent, hostile locker room, a magazine in my hands. I looked at the pitying face of Ashley, at the averted eyes of my former teammates. I looked at the trash bag filled with the debris of my dead dream. Nowhere else to go. I had nothing. No team, no scholarship, no home, no future. I had nothing left to lose. I finished packing the last of my things into the box, tossed the trash bag in the bin, and walked out of that locker room without a word, without a single look back. The magazine article was clutched in my hand. It wasn't a plan. It wasn't even really a hope. It was just a direction. I drove my beat-up old Honda, now filled with every single thing I owned in the world, to the edge of the university campus, and I parked. I pulled out my phone. My bank account had less than $500 in it. I looked at the magazine. Article again. There was no phone number, no website. Only a grainy photo of a rusty mailbox on a dusty mountain road, with a small, hand-painted sign that read, "Morgan." It was insane. It was a desperate, stupid, impossible long shot. I put the car in drive, pulled out of the university that had cast me out, and headed for the Pacific Coast Highway. I didn't know if he would train me. I didn't know if I could even find him. I didn't know what I would do tomorrow. But for the first time in days, I wasn't looking back. I was moving forward. I was going to find the monk of Malibu. I was going to build a better boat. The Pacific Coast Highway is a liar. In postcards, it's a ribbon of silver asphalt curving between sapphire water and golden hills, a dream of freedom. But when you're driving it with no destination other than a desperate, half-mad hope, it feels like the edge of the world. My beat-up Honda hugged the cliffs, the sun glaring off the water, and with every mile north, I felt my old life, my university life, shrink into an insignificant speck in my rearview mirror. I was driving towards a ghost, a myth, a man who might not even exist, and every single thing I owned in the world was in the backseat of my car. Finding Cal Morgan's place was a test in itself. There was no address, no signpost, only the grainy photo from the magazine. I spent hours unwinding sun-baked canyon roads in the hills above Malibu, my phone losing service, the hope in my heart beginning to curdle into a familiar despair. I was about to give up, to turn the car around and just keep driving to where I had no idea, but then I saw it. A dusty, unmarked turnoff, and at the end of it, a single rusty mailbox, exactly like the one in the photo with the name Morgan. Painted on the side in faded, peeling letters, the training facility, if you could call it that, was a monument to brutalist simplicity. It was a single long, low concrete building that looked more like a military bunker than a gym, and next to it, a single 50-meter, 8-lane swimming pool. The water in the pool was not the sparkling, pristine blue of my university's natatorium. It was a deep, dark, menacing green, reflecting the harsh, unforgiving sun. It looked like a block of the ocean that had been carved out and dropped onto the top of a mountain. A man was sitting in a plastic lawn chair at the edge of the pool. He was maybe 60, with a body that was lean and wiry, a face like a dried-up riverbed, and eyes the color of a faded pair of blue jeans. He wore a stained baseball cap and a scowl. He watched me get out of my car and walk towards him, his expression a perfect mixture of boredom and contempt. It was Cal Morgan. Can't you read the sign? He grunted, his voice a gravelly rasp. "There is no sign," I said. "Exactly." He replied and spat a stream of tobacco juice onto the dusty ground. "Get lost. I had come too far." I had nothing left to lose. My grandmother's words, my father's words, the memory of my Lolo's stubborn willet, all coalesced into a single, hard point of defiance. "My name is Maya Evans," I said, my voice steady. I was a swimmer for SQ. I was the fastest freestyler on their roster, and I just got kicked off the team. He looked me up and down, his gaze lingering on my swimmer's shoulders. He was unimpressed. "So you're a head case with a political problem?" he said. "Not interested." "I train swimmers, not sob stories." "I'm not here to tell you a story," I said. "I'm here to swim." He stared at me for a long, silent moment. "You got a suit?" "In my car." "Put it on," he said, a flicker of something that might have been interest in his faded eyes. "The test is simple. I have a pace clock. You have the water. We'll see which one of you breaks first." The test was not simple. The test was a journey into a special kind of hell. As I stood on the starting block, Cal Morgan's instructions were brief and brutal. 100 100s, he barked. Freestyle on a 1-minute, 10-second interval. You hold your pace. You don't stop. You don't get out. You miss an interval, you're done. You puke in my pool, you clean it, and then you're done. You quit. You get the hell off my mountain. Go. 100 100-meter swims. 10,000 meters. 6 miles. It was a workout designed not just to test the body, but to break the spirit. It was a workout designed to make you quit. The first 10 were easy. My body was rested, and the familiar rhythm of the strokes was a comfort. The water was cold, a shock to the system, but my muscles warmed quickly. I hit the wall, my eyes on. The big, sweeping hand of the pace clock. My turns crisp. 105, 106, 5 seconds of rest, 4 seconds. It was manageable. By the 30th one, the pain started. A low, familiar burn in my shoulders and quads. My lungs began to ache. The 4 seconds of rest between each swim was no longer enough time to catch my breath. It was just enough time to register the pain before I had to push off the wall and do it all over again. By the 50th one, I was in uncharted territory. I had never done a set this long, this relentless. My body was screaming. Every muscle, fiber was a thread of fire. My mind started to play tricks on me. "You can't do this. This is insane. Just stop." No one would blame you for stopping. I saw Ashley's triumphant, pitying face in my mind's eye. I saw the averted gazes of my teammates. I gritted my teeth and pushed off the wall, not for them. By the 70th one, I was operating on something beyond muscle. It was pure, stubborn will. My turns were sloppy, my kick was fading. I was losing feeling in my arms. I hit the wall at 108, only 2 seconds of rest. Not enough time. As I pushed off, my mind, desperate for an escape, flew across the ocean. I thought of my Lolo, the fisherman from Cybelum. I thought of his story about the storm. He had been at sea for 2 days, his little Barodo tossed around like a toy, his arms raw from fighting the tiller. He had told me that in the second day, the pain was gone. The fear was gone. There was only the boat, the water, and his will to get home. He had entered a state beyond exhaustion. He had found the core of himself. Find your core, knack his. Voice whispered in my memory. I stopped thinking about the pain. I stopped thinking about the clock. I just swam. I focused on the feel of the water on my hands, on the sound of my own breathing, on the black line. The faithful, unwavering black line. Pull, breathe, kick, turn, again, and again. By the 90th one, I was in a trance. I had found the place my Lolo had talked about. A place beyond pain. My body was an automaton. My mind was a quiet, empty room. I had broken through the wall. I hit the wall at 109, 1 second of rest. It was an eternity. I pushed off for the last 10. The final 100 was a blur. I don't remember swimming it. I just remember hitting the wall for the last time and hanging there, my body a dead weight, my lungs on fire, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I had done it. I slowly, painfully pulled my head out of the water. Cal Morgan was standing at the edge of the pool, looking down at me. His expression was exactly the same as it had been 2 hours ago. Bored contempt. Your last 10 were sloppy as hell, he grunted and spat another stream of tobacco juice. You got slow? I just gasped for air, unable to form words. But you didn't quit, he said, his voice a low grumble. He stared at me for a long moment. Practice is at 05:00 tomorrow. Don't be late. He turned and walked back to his chair, leaving. Me hanging on the wall, my body screaming in agony, my heart soaring with a small, fragile, and impossibly beautiful victory. I had passed the test. The weeks that followed were the most brutal of my life. Cal Morgan's training philosophy was simple. He was going to tear me down to the foundation and rebuild me from scratch. Everything I had learned in my 10 years of competitive swimming, he told me was wrong. Your catch is weak, he'd bark, pacing the side of the pool as I swam. You're pulling with your arm, not with your back. It's inefficient, useless. Your kick is all splash, he'd yell. You think you're a motorboat? You're wasting energy. Kick from your hips, not your knees. Are you even listening to me, Evans? Your head position is too high. You're swimming uphill. You're creating drag. You're slow. Slow. It was his favorite word. Every drill, every set, every critique was designed to reinforce one simple, soul-crushing idea that I was not as good as I thought I was. He made me swim with my fists clenched to learn how to use my forearms. He tied my ankles together to force me to use my core. He made me do dry land workouts that were so grueling they made my test swim feel like a warm-up, hauling tires and ropes up the steep canyon hills. He was a monster, a relentless, unforgiving tyrant, and my body was his science experiment. There were days I would crawl back to the small Spartan cabin he let me use, my muscles so sore I could barely move. I'd lie on my cot, my body shaking with exhaustion, and I would think about quitting. It would be so easy to just get in my car and drive away, but then I would think of Ashley's smile. I would think of the word revoked, and I would think of my Lolo, rebuilding his boat one broken plank at a time. So I would wake up the next morning at 0430, my body screaming in protest, and I would do it all over again. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, something began to change. I started to feel a new kind of power in the water. The new catch technique, the one that had felt so awkward and wrong at first, was starting to click. I could feel the water not as something to be fought, but as something to be held, to be leveraged. My kick was quieter now, more efficient, a steady, powerful engine propelling me forward. Cal started talking to me about more than just technique. He talked about the sport. He told me stories about the Olympics, about the politics, the pressure. The water doesn't care about your feelings, he told me one afternoon. It doesn't care if you had a fight with your mommy or if your little team captain is a backstabbing snake. The water is honest. It only rewards the work. That's why we're here. To do the work. The rest is just noise. I was discovering something I had lost along the way, my love for the process, for the simple, honest, brutal work of swimming, free from the politics, the drama, the need for approval. It was just me, the water, and the unwavering black line. After 2 months of this relentless deconstruction and reconstruction, he had me swim a timed 100-meter freestyle, a time trial. It was the first time he had let me go all out since my test swim. I stood on the block, my body a stranger to me. It was leaner, harder, more powerful. When I dived in, the water felt different. I felt different in it. My stroke was longer, more powerful. My turns were explosive. The final 25 meters, where I used to feel the pain set in, I felt acceleration. I hit the wall, my lungs burning, and I looked up at the clock, and I gasped. It was a time that was 2 full seconds faster than my personal best. 2 seconds. In the world of swimming, it might as well have been a lifetime. It was a world-class time, an Olympic-level time. I pulled myself out of the pool, my heart pounding with a wild, disbelieving joy. Cal Morgan was standing there, looking at his stopwatch. He clicked it off. Not bad, kid. He grunted, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of a smile on his face. You're starting to look like a real swimmer. He turned and walked away. From him, it was the highest praise imaginable. Week later, he handed me a piece of paper. It was an entry form for the U.S. Open Swimming Championships. You're ready, he said. It's time to stop training in the dark. It's time to go remind them who you are. I looked at the form. I knew my old team would be there. Ashley would be there. The revenge I had been dreaming of, the one that had fueled me through all this pain, was no longer a dream. It now had a date. It now had a location. And I was ready. I was a better boat. And I was ready to sail right through the heart of there. Storm. Start writing Act 4. The IU Natatorium in Indianapolis is one of the cathedrals of American swimming. It's a place of history, of legends. The air is thick with the smell of chlorine and the ghosts of Olympic champions. When I had imagined myself here a year ago, I had imagined walking in with my team, a sea of cardinal and gold, part of a legacy, part of a family. Instead, I walked in alone. Well, not entirely alone. Cal was with me, a silent, grizzled gargoyle, and a faded baseball cap. But we were an island in the swirling, chaotic ocean of the U.S. Open Championships. All around us were the big teams, Texas, Stanford, Cal Berkeley, their swimmers moving in loud, confident packs, their matching warm-up jackets a uniform of belonging. We had no team tent. No legion of assistant coaches and trainers. Just me, in a plain black swimsuit, and Cal, with his ever-present scowl and a tattered canvas bag holding our 2 stopwatches. We were unattached, unknowns. We were nobody. And then I saw them. Across the sprawling pool deck, the SCU team was setting up their camp. They looked exactly the same, a gaggle of blonde ponytails and easy, privileged laughter. And at the center of it, holding court, was Ashley Hayes. She saw me. Our eyes met from across 100 feet of chlorinated water. Her expression was not one of hatred. It was worse. It was a look of faint, dismissive pity, the kind you'd give to a stray dog that had wandered into a fancy party. She nudged the girl next to her, and they both looked at me and shared a small, secret smile. The message was clear. Look at her, the girl we threw away. What is she even doing here? My old coach, Miller, was there too. He saw me, and his face flushed a guilty red before he turned away, suddenly fascinated by the contents of his clipboard. They all thought I was a ghost. A sad, pathetic reminder of a problem they had solved. They had no idea I was a reckoning. Ignore them. Cal grunted, without me having to say a word. Their noise. We're here to do the work. The work. For 3 months, it had been my entire world. The pain, the exhaustion, the endless, grinding pursuit of a perfect stroke. Cal and I didn't talk much about my old team. We didn't talk about revenge. We talked about drag coefficients, about entry angles, about the precise, beautiful, brutal physics of moving a human body through water faster than anyone else. He had taken the broken pieces of my confidence and forged them not into a shield, but into a weapon. And today was the first time I was going to unsheath it. The hours leading up to the preliminary heats of the 100-meter freestyle were a blur of quiet, focused routine. I warmed up in the dive well, away from the chaos. On the main pool, I went through the stretching exercises Cal had drilled into me. I ate the protein bar he handed me at the exact time he told me to. I was a machine and he was my engineer dot as I sat in the ready room, the waiting area for swimmers before their heats. The noise began to seep in. The loud, boastful laughter of other swimmers, the nervous energy, the weight of expectation. For a moment, the old, familiar feeling of isolation, of being the outsider, began to creep back in. I felt a flicker of the old doubt, the fear that Ashley and the team had been right, that I was somehow fundamentally broken. I closed my eyes. I shut out the noise of the ready room, and I went home. I went back to the stories my mother told me, the ones her father had told her. I went back to Cybelum. I pictured my Lolo, a small, tough man with a face cured by sea salt and sun, standing in his little Barodo, his fishing boat, looking out at the vast, unpredictable Sulu Sea. He was never the biggest or the strongest fisherman in his village, but he was the smartest. He was the most patient. He knew the currents. He understood the water. He didn't fight the sea. He became a part of it. You do not command the water, Knack. I could hear his voice, a memory passed down through my mother. You listen to it, you respect it, and then it will let you be its master. The girls around me were listening to music, psyching themselves up. I was listening to the ghost of a fisherman from a small town half a world away, and my heart, which had been pounding with anxiety, began to slow. My breathing deepened. The fear receded, replaced by a profound, quiet calm. I was not Maya Evans, the outcast. I was of Villanueva. My heritage was a lineage of quiet strength, of people who knew how to weather a storm. This was just another storm, and I knew how to be the master of the water. When they called my heat, I stood up, my mind clear, my body humming with a controlled, latent power. I walked out onto the pool deck. The roar of the crowd was a distant hum. My heat was one of the early ones, populated by the swimmers with slower qualifying times. I had been seated based on my old pre-cal times. Because of that, I was assigned to an outside lane. Lane 8, the slow lane. The lane for long shots and no-hopers. Ashley and the rest of my old team were in the stands, waiting for their own faster heats. I knew they were watching me. It was perfect. On the starting block, the world shrinks. There's only the rough, cool surface under your bare feet, the sharp, clean smell of the chlorinated water, and the vast, silent potential of the 50 meters in front of you. I looked down my lane. The black line was there. My old, faithful friend, my guide. The announcer's voice boomed through the natatorium. Heat 3 women's 100-meter freestyle. He read our names. When he got to mine, he said, in lane 8, unattached. Maya Evans. The word unattached hung in the air, a formal declaration of my exile, the starter's command. Take your marks. I settled into my starting position, my body a coiled spring of potential energy. The silence was absolute. The weight of the last 3 months, the pain, the work, the doubt, the hope, it was all here, in this one single moment. I thought of Cal, be the fastest. I thought of my Lolo, listen to the water. The starting beep was an explosion of sound. I hit the water in a clean, perfect dive, my body a single streamlined arrow. My underwater dolphin kicks were powerful, rhythmic, a skill Cal and I had spent hundreds of hours perfecting. I surfaced further ahead than any other swimmer in the pool, already a quarter of a body length in the lead. The first 50 meters were a controlled fury. I could feel the new power in my stroke, the technique Cal had drilled into me. The high elbow catch, the powerful pull with my back and lats, the quiet, efficient kick. It felt effortless. It felt like flying. I hit the wall for the flip turn. My time on the split clock already a full second faster than my old personal best dot. As I pushed off the wall for the final 50, I let it go. I unleashed everything. All the anger, all the betrayal, all the humiliation. I channeled it all into the water. I turned it into pure, relentless speed. I couldn't see the other swimmers. I didn't care where they were. My only competition was the clock. My only opponent was the ghost of the swimmer I used to be. The last 15 meters were a tunnel of pure, glorious pain. My lungs were on fire. My muscles were screaming. But for the first time in my life, I welcomed it. The pain was proof of the work. The pain was my victory. I surged towards the wall, my arm reaching, stretching, until my fingertips slammed into the touchpad. For a moment, I just hung there, my head down, gasping for air, the water churning around me. I had no idea how I'd done. I just knew I had left nothing in the pool. Slowly, I lifted my head and turned to look at the massive scoreboard. The crowd, which had been a low roar, had gone strangely, completely silent, and then I saw it. Next to my name, Evans, and the number 8 were the results. First, my time, 52.18 seconds. And then next to the time, 2 small, beautiful, impossible letters, WR.no, not WR. It was OR. No, it was US Open record. The numbers didn't make sense. 52.18. My previous best time had been 54.2. I hadn't just beaten my personal best, I had obliterated it. I had swum a time that was not just world class. It was one of the fastest times in history, from lane 8. In a preliminary heat, the silence in the natatorium finally broke. It was not applause. It was a single, collective, explosive sound of pure, unadulterated shock. The announcers' voices were crackling over the PA system, no longer the bored drone of the preliminaries, but a frantic, disbelieving shout. Unbelievable. In Heat 3, from lane 8, Maya Evans, swimming unattached, has just smashed the US Open record. I don't believe what I'm seeing. My eyes instinctively went to the stands. I found them, the SCU team. They were all on their feet, their mouths hanging open. Their faces were a beautiful, chaotic canvas of confusion, shock, and a dawning, sickening horror. And then I saw Ashley. She was staring at the scoreboard, her face completely white, as if she had just seen a ghost. In a way, she had. The ghost of the girl she had tried to bury had just come back, and she was faster than anyone in the world. I slowly, deliberately pulled myself out of the pool. The other swimmers in my heat were staring at me with a mixture of awe and terror. A swarm of reporters and officials were rushing towards me. I ignored them all. My eyes found the one person in the building I was looking for. High up in the stands, away from the other coaches, Cal Morgan was standing, his arms crossed. He watched me, his face showing no emotion, and then he gave me a single, almost imperceptible nod. The message was sent. The shot had been fired, and it had been heard around the world. The moment after the race was a chaotic, beautiful blur. A wall of sound crashed down on me, the roar of a crowd that had just witnessed an impossibility. Officials in blue blazers were suddenly all around me, their faces a mixture of disbelief and frantic excitement. A woman with a microphone and a cameraman were shouting my name. I was pulled from the water, a towel was draped over my shoulders, and I was guided, stumbling, towards a throng of reporters. This was the part one was not prepared for, the race that was easy. That was just swimming. This, the lights, the questions, the sudden, intense focus of the entire swimming world, was terrifying. Maya, an incredible swim. A new US Open record. Where did that come from? You're swimming unattached. Who have you been training with? What does this mean for your future? My mind was a blank. I looked desperately through the crowd and found Cal. He was standing near the edge of the scrum, his arms crossed, his expression as impassive as ever. He caught my eye and gave me a short, almost imperceptible shake of his head. It was a command. Don't give them anything. Stay in your own lane. I took a breath. I'm just here to swim, I said, my voice hoarse. I felt good in the water. Today, I'm happy with the time. Happy? The reporter laughed. You just posted the fastest time in the world this year? Are you sending a message to your old team at SCU? The question was a baited hook. I could see the narrative they wanted to write, the bitter, vengeful outcast. I refused to give it to them. I'm not sending a message to anyone, I said. My voice flat and calm. I'm just focused on my next race. Cal pushed his way through the reporters. She's done, he grunted, putting a protective hand on my shoulder and steering me away. She needs to warm down. He led me away from the chaos, back to the quiet anonymity of the warm-down pool. As we walked, I could hear the buzz of the crowd. I could see my own shocked face replaying on the giant scoreboard. My secret was out. I was no longer an unknown. The message had been sent, whether I had intended it to be or not. That night, in my small, nondescript hotel room, I watched the sports news, and it was me. I was the lead story. They showed my race from every conceivable angle. They had commentators breaking down my new, powerful stroke. They had my shocked, triumphant face plastered across the screen. And then they cut to a live shot from the natatorium. It was my old team. A reporter was ambushing Ashley on the pool. Deck, Ashley, the reporter called out. Your former teammate, Maya Evans, just broke the US Open record. What are your thoughts on that performance? Ashley, for the first time in her life, looked completely blindsided. The political smile was gone. Her face was pale. We're very happy for Maya, she stammered, the lie so thin. It was transparent. We always knew she was a talented swimmer. We wish her the best. Is it true she was voted off the team just this summer? The reporter pressed. Do you regret that decision now? Ashley's face froze. I have. To go warm up for my race, she mumbled, and turned and fled from the camera, her teammates trailing awkwardly behind her. I turned off the television. Seeing her panic, her humiliation, it didn't give me the surge of satisfaction I thought it would. I just felt quiet. Cal had been right. They were just noise. The real conversation, the only one that mattered, had happened between me and the clock. And the clock had declared me the winner. The next day was the final. I walked onto the pool deck with a new kind of confidence. I was no longer an unknown. I was the top seed. The girl from lane 8 was now in lane 4, the champions lane. As I was heading to the warm-up pool, I saw them, my old team. They were standing in a tight, nervous cluster. They all saw me coming. This time, they didn't look away. They stared at me with a new expression, a toxic cocktail of resentment, fear, and a bitter, grudging respect. Ashley stepped forward, blocking my path. Her face was a carefully constructed mask of sincerity. Maya, she said, her voice low, that was an incredible swim yesterday. We were all so impressed. Were you? I asked, my voice neutral. Listen, she said, taking a step closer. I think there's been a lot of misunderstanding. The vote, it was never personal. It was just team dynamics. Maybe we could talk after the meet, clear the air. I looked at her pleading, dishonest eyes, at the desperate attempt to reclaim the narrative, to smooth things over, to make this my fault too. A few months ago, her words might have worked. Her political maneuvering might have confused me, made me question myself. But that was before Cal, before the mountain, before the work. I was not that girl anymore. I didn't say a word. I just looked at her, my gaze as calm and empty as the surface of the pool at dawn. I held her gaze for a long, silent moment, letting her see that there was absolutely nothing behind my eyes for her. No anger, no hurt, no recognition. Nothing at all, Dot, and then I simply stepped around her and kept walking as if she were a stranger who had momentarily blocked my path. It was the cruelest, most honest thing I could have possibly done. I had not just beaten her in the pool. I had erased her from my story. As I was stretching by the side of the pool, two people approached me. They were older, dressed in official USA swimming blazers. A man and a woman. Maya Evans, the woman asked, her smile professional but warm. My name is Sarah Miller. This is Tom Davis. We're with the National Team Steering Committee. I stood up, my heart beginning to pound a new, different rhythm. It's a pleasure to meet you, I said, shaking their hands. The pleasure is all ours, Mr. Davis said, his eyes full of a genuine, almost fatherly pride. Miss Evans, we've been reviewing your performance from yesterday. The time of 52.18. It is, as you know, a new U.S. Open record. What you may not know is that it is also the third fastest time swam in the world by anyone in the last 4 years. I just stared at him, unable to process the scale of what he was saying. The Olympic trials are in 6 months, Miss Miller continued. Normally, entry is determined through a series of qualifying meets. However, the committee has the authority to extend a discretionary invitation to athletes who demonstrate extraordinary world-class potential. Your swim yesterday was more than extraordinary. It was historic. She handed me a thick, formal envelope with the USA swimming logo on it. On behalf of the United States Olympic Committee, she said, her smile widening, we would be honored to formally invite you to compete at the U.S. Olympic trials. I took the envelope. My hands were trembling. Olympic trials. The 2 words I had dreamed of my entire life. The dream that had been pronounced dead on a Sunday afternoon in a sterile classroom. It was back. And it was real. Thank you, I whispered, the words feeling impossibly small. No, thank you, Mr. Davis said. Go show us what else you've got. I swam the final that night in a daze of pure joy. I won. It wasn't another record-breaking swim. It didn't need to be. It was just a clean, powerful, dominant victory. As I stood on the podium, the gold medal around my neck, I looked out at the crowd. I saw Cal still in the stands, still with his arms crossed. But this time he was definitely smiling. And in the stands, just behind the podium, I saw Ashley Hayes and the rest of the SCU team standing and politely applauding. Their faces a perfect, beautiful picture of agony. They had to watch me win. They had to watch me succeed. And they had to know that they were the ones who had made it all possible. My revenge was complete. 1 year later, to the day, Sunday, August 3rd, 2026, the anniversary of my exile, I am not in a sterile classroom. I am in the ready room of the Olympic Aquatic Center. In 1 hour, I will be swimming in the Olympic final of the 100-meter freestyle. Representing the United States of America. The past year has been a dream. The trials were a battle, but I was forged for battle now. I made the team. And tonight, I have a real chance at a gold medal. My phone buzzes. It's a text from my mother. It's a picture of our entire family, my parents, my titas, my titos. All my cousins crowded into our little house in Cybalom, all of them wearing red, white, and blue shirts with my name on the back. The whole town is watching, Knack. We are so proud. Now go, be the master of the water. We love you. I smile, a deep, genuine smile. I think of my Lolo, and I know he's watching, too, on a television monitor in the corner of the ready room. They're showing a recap of the NCAA championships from a few months ago. SCU. the relay team. Ashley is swimming the anchor leg. Vey came in third, a respectable finish, but not a championship. I watch her pull herself out of the pool, her face a mask of disappointment, and I feel absolutely nothing. No anger, no pity, no satisfaction. Just a vast, quiet, peaceful distance. They are a ghost from another life, a footnote in a story that is no longer about them. An official calls my name. It's time. I stand up and walk towards the tunnel that leads to the pool deck. The roar of the Olympic crowd is a distant, beautiful thunder. My revenge wasn't just in proving them wrong. It was in becoming so much more than they could have ever imagined. Their petty betrayal was the storm that broke my old small boat, and I had used the pieces to build a ship worthy of sailing on. This ocean, the greatest ocean in the world, I was ready. The air in California on an August night is thick and alive. It smells of salt from the nearby Sulu Sea, of night-blooming jasmine, and of the sweet, damp earth after a brief evening. Rain. The soundtrack is not one of silence, but of life. The rhythmic chirping of 1,000 crickets, the gentle call of a gecko, the distant, soft murmur of the waves on the shore. On this night, Sunday, August 3rd, 2025, Elena Evans sat on the wide veranda of their family home, a home built by her own father, and listened to the familiar sounds of her world. But she felt no peace. Her husband, Mateo, sat beside her, his hand resting gently on her knee. They were not speaking. They were waiting, half a world away in a sterile classroom in California. Their daughter's fate was being decided. They should have called by now, Elena said, her voice a tight whisper in the warm darkness. She was twisting a loose thread on her worn cotton. Daster, the meeting was at 4 o'clock their time. It's almost 8 now. It should be over. No news is good news, Mahal, Mateo said, though his voice lacked conviction. He knew as well as she did that Maya never waited to call after a meet or an important meeting. Their daughter was punctual, disciplined, a creature of routine. This deviation was a screaming alarm bell in the quiet of their provincial life. Elena stood up and walked to the edge of the veranda, looking out past the swaying palm trees towards the dark, invisible sea. She thought of Maya, her brilliant, quiet, complicated daughter. She was so American in so many ways, her ambition, her fierce independence, her relentless drive. But her heart, Elena knew, was from here. Her stubbornness was the stubbornness of the Panay Mountains that rose behind their town. Her quiet strength was the strength of the fishermen who went out on the sea each day, trusting in their skill and their faith. Elena had been so proud and so terrified when Maya had accepted the scholarship to SQ. It was a world away, a world of unimaginable wealth and privilege. They had raised her to be a worker, to believe in the simple, honest currency of effort, the way her own father, a simple fisherman, had taught her. The sea does not care who your father is, he used to say. It only cares how strong you. Build your boat. But Elena knew the world of collegiate sports in America was not the sea. It was a world of politics, of smiling crocodiles and hidden agendas. And Maya, her fierce, honest Maya, did not know how to navigate those treacherous waters. She only knew how to swim. The shrill ring of the telephone inside the house shattered the night's gentle rhythm. Elena and Mateo looked at each other, a shared cold dread in their eyes. Elena rushed inside, her heart pounding, and snatched the receiver from the wall. Hello? The sound that came back to her was the one every parent fears most. It was the sound of her child's world breaking apart. A raw, ragged, gulping sob that was barely recognizable. Ma, the voice on the other end cried, a universe of pain in that single word. Maya? Anak Ko, what is it? What happened? Elena's own voice was trembling. Mateo was beside her. Now, his hand on her shoulder, his face a mask of worry. For the next 10 minutes, Elena listened as the story came pouring out of her daughter in a torrent of grief and rage. The words were broken, interspersed with sobs, but the meaning was clear. Team meeting. Ashley. They said I was selfish. They voted. Ma, they voted me out. The scholarship. It's gone. They're kicking me out of my room. Everything is gone. Elena listened, her body going cold, then hot, then cold again. She closed her eyes, and in her mind, she saw not her brilliant, powerful daughter, the champion swimmer, but a small, lost girl, all alone, half a world away, with her boat sinking out from under her. A wave of pure, primal, maternal fury washed over her, so hot it almost buckled her knees. She wanted to get on a plane. She wanted to fly to California and stand in front of this coach, this team captain, and unleash a storm of Visayan wrath that would make them wish they had never been born, but she couldn't. Her daughter was not here. She was a voice on a crackling telephone line, and she didn't need her mother's rage right now. She needed her mother's strength. Elena took a deep, steadying breath, pushing her own heartbreak down into a deep, locked box in her soul. She would allow herself to feel it later. Right now, Maya needed her. She waited until the sobs on the other end of the line had subsided into a miserable, exhausted quiet. Okay, enact KO, she said, her voice a calm, steady anchor in her daughter's storm. You listen to me now? Is your life over? Indeed. No, it is not. When she finally hung up the phone an hour later, the strength she had projected for her daughter crumbled. She sagged against the wall, the full weight of her helplessness, of the thousands of miles that separated her from her child, crashing down on her. Mateo caught her, his strong arms wrapping around her as a single silent tear traced a path down her cheek. What can we do, Mateo? She whispered into his chest. We are here. She is there, alone. He led her back out to the veranda, to the 2 old rocking chairs that had been her father's. They sat in silence for a long time, listening to the night. Do you remember? Mateo said finally, his voice a low, gentle rumble. The year of the great typhoon, 1984, the one your father called Andeng. Elena nodded, a faint smile touching her lips. He lost everything that year. His boat, his nets. Yes, Mateo said. I remember. I was just a boy. I remember seeing him the next day, standing on the beach, looking at the wreckage of his Barodo. It was just a pile of splintered wood. And all the other fishermen, they were weeping. They were cursing God and the sea, but not your father. Do you know what he was doing? He was gathering the wood, Elena whispered, the memory returning to her like a gentle tide. He was gathering the wood, Mateo repeated. He found every single piece he could. He dragged it back up the beach, piece by piece. People thought he was mad. His boat was gone, but he just kept working. He took the broken pieces, and he found the ones that were still strong. He took wood from the forest, and slowly, day by day, he built a new boat. It was not as pretty as the old one. It was smaller. It had scars, but it was stronger. He told me he learned more about being a boat builder from that storm than he had in 20 years of calm seas. Mateo reached out and took his wife's hand. His own hands were rough and calloused from a lifetime of working their small farm. Just as her father's had been, that is the blood that is in our daughter's veins. Elena, he said, his voice full of a quiet, unshakable faith, they have broken her boat. It is a terrible thing, but she is her Lolo's granddaughter. She will gather the broken pieces, and she will build a new one. A stronger one. Our job is not to fly there and fight her battles for her. Our job is to be her shore, to be the place she knows she can always come home to, to remind her that she knows how to build. Elena looked at her husband, at his kind, steady face, and she felt the knot of fear in her chest begin to loosen. He was right. The rage was useless. The distance was a fact. But their love, their faith, their history, that was a force that could cross oceans. That was the strength she could send to her daughter. She leaned her head on his shoulder, the old wood of the rocking chair creaking rhythmically. She looked out at the dark, vast, and unknowable sea. It was a terrifying thing. But her father had never feared it, and his daughter and his granddaughter would not fear it either. They would build. She will be all right, Elena said, her voice no longer a whisper, but a statement of fact. She is a Villanueva, after all. The night was still. The crickets chirped. The waves crashed softly on the shore. And in a small house in Cybelum, two parents sent their love, their faith, and the strength of 100 generations of fishermen and farmers out across the dark water, a silent, unbreakable lifeline to their daughter who was about to learn how to survive her own storm.